delighted to introduce to you Anushay Hossain. So a little bit about her workshop that she's going to do for you. Feminism frequently receives a bad rep, and women who call themselves feminists are often punished by society. Women's talents and ideas are silenced by the patriarchal structure ingrained in society. Consequently, a vast number of global challenges go unsolved. In this workshop titled Human Rights, Anushay Hossain, a feminist policy analyst and journalist, will use her childhood influences growing up in Bangladesh and her current work in Washington as a springboard for discussion about global women's health and rights. Her blog, Anushay's Point, is featured in the Huffington Post, in which she analyzes the implications of U.S. foreign policy on the health and rights of women around the world. Hossain's current writing is regularly featured on Forbes Women, Huffington Post, the International Herald Tribune, Miss Magazine, NPR, and Washington Examiner. So if you saw, please give a hand to Ms. Anushay.
Thank you guys so much for being here. I'm so excited. I've never been to Detroit, and I don't know if having this up was a good idea or not, because I was telling the fabulous organizers beforehand. This was before I had money, so it's an old picture, and all I can think is, wow, don't take your weight when you're younger, for granted, ever. So yes, my name is Anushay Hossain, and I'm a journalist and a policy analyst, and I wear a lot of hats, and I talk really fast. And the story of my life has been my mom telling me to slow down. So if I'm talking too fast, just throw something at me or something, and I'll slow down. So I guess I'll start by talking about how I really got involved in everything. I'm the Global Programs Director at the Feminist Majority Foundation, which is a political action organization in Washington. So I've actually built my career working on gender and policy for the past decade. I'm a lot older than I look. I just had a birthday last week, so I'm just aging even more. And I kind of stumbled onto the journalism part of everything. But the core of what I have always done, and really what I'm about, is getting my version of feminism out there, and out of kind of the negative hole I feel like it's been driven into and buried under. At the core of everything, really trying to educate and advocate for women's rights as human rights. I feel like a lot of times, a lot of women's issues and issues that affect women and girls are seen as female issues, when really, for who we are as one of the most underused resources in the world, 50% of the global population, it affects all of us. It affects our families, it affects our communities, how we're educated, our access to a lot of resources that are considered basic human rights. So a lot of people don't really understand how things work in Washington, but a big part of my job is analyzing how U.S. foreign policy impacts the health and rights of women and girls around the world. So how many of you guys know about the 1994 Cairo Conference, the International Conference on Population Development? Wow, did I just date myself? So this was a really, really important UN conference, and it was considered a really kind of pivotal moment in how population policies are formulated around the world. And it was when population policy stopped being about controlling population growth and slowing population growth and started being about empowering women. Thousands and thousands of world leaders and NGOs got together in Cairo. It's such a famous conference. It's the ICPD, the International Conference on Population Development. It's so famous, it's commonly just referred to as Cairo, especially when you're in the marble halls of Capitol Hill. So basically, this conference was when people decided that, it's described as this like aha moment in Cairo, when this light bulb went off, that people realized that, oh, women don't want to get married at 11, 12 years old and have 10, 15 kids by the time you're 16 and then die in childbirth. If you give women access to education and higher salary jobs, they're going to choose to have smaller families. If they have access to family planning, they're going to lower the fertility rate on their own. So this was this big platform, and everybody was like, we're going to have universal access to reproductive health care by 2015. And everybody was like, the core of everyone's policy, and major donors from the US to the UK was focusing on women's rights about $1.5 billion to contribute every single year from 1994 until 2015 to achieve this goal of universal reproductive health and access. So as we can all see, that hasn't happened. But what a big part of the movement, the global health movement in Washington is trying to do with all these organizations such as Population Action International, the Guttmacher Institute, where I work, International Women's Health Coalition, is really getting the U.S. foreign policy back on the Cairo roadmap. We're trying to get policy levels back, get monetary levels back to what's stipulated in the Cairo roadmap, because it's the most feminist and also human rights focus that this legislation basically has. And that conference was considered a huge win for feminists who've been saying all along that if women cannot control the amount of children that they're having, they can never be empowered. And it's just so strange and frustrating to be working in this field that's not like cancer or something that we're looking for a cure for. It's something that we know exactly how to solve, and people aren't making investments towards it. And it's 2013, and it's estimated about 250 million women around the world wish to either delay or prevent pregnancy altogether. They don't have any access to modern contraception. Every year, about 529,000 women die in pregnancy-related complications, and 99% of those deaths actually occur in the developing world. And what's really important to remember is that a lot of times we're hearing about these women dying in childbirth, but when you think about it, they're actually girls, because child marriage is, of course, a huge factor. So a big part of my job is doing that, and I come from Bangladesh, and my family's still there. I'm completely Bangladeshi. And the first time I came to the States, I actually came to attend college, and I really can't talk about my journey without talking about my mother, who was a very active women's rights activist in Bangladesh, and she still is. And she was just very ahead of her time. And when we were growing up in Bangladesh, it was kind of like this bubble where we had access to the best schools. If we got sick, we got to leave the country for the best medical care. But my mom was really, really good about showing us from a really young age that for the vast majority of Bangladeshi women and girls, that's just not, they have a very different reality. They don't have any access to health care. There's no concept of health care. In fact, 90% of births in Bangladesh still take place at home with no skilled birth attendant present. So my mom was really, really influential in making me who I am and doing the kind of work that I do. But when I was a teenager, she would drag me to all her women's rights symposiums and like her feminist conferences, and it was like horrible. I just thought I had the worst life. I was like, why are you doing this? And especially the older I got, it's like, I want to go and hang out with my friends after school, and oh my God, I would just be like in a whole different world. But of course now, it paid off, and I can tell you honestly, especially now that I have a baby, your mom is always right. Listen to your mother, and especially the young women I've been seeing around here, do not walk around campus wearing those high heels. It will hurt your back. You'll pay for it, trust me. So anyhow, so my mom was a huge influence. And when I left Bangladesh and I went to college, like many of you guys are doing now, your 20s are really this period of reflection when you're defining yourself, you're learning so much, so you're questioning a lot. And I was one of those typical girls. I was like, I'm not a feminist, but A, B, C, D, I'm a feminist. Women's rights, you're a feminist. But I was really shocked when I came to America at how the word had such a horrible association and connotation, and it was so angry and scary, and nobody called themselves feminists. And Gloria Steinem came to UVA and she gave a talk, and she was talking about how we have to reclaim this word because so many young women are petrified of it, or because of the stigma of it, don't want to associate with it, that we're losing the battle, and there's nothing to counter the negative associations. And she was talking about how if you believe that women should have equal access to economic opportunities, to education, to basically all these things that we've been denied for so long, you are a feminist. And I think that was the first time that I articulated that, yes, I was a feminist. And I remember I went back and I told my mom, and I thought she was going to be so happy. And she was so worried, because she was worried that in America, if I called myself a feminist, I would be categorized and labeled, and I'd have to fight, you know, my whole life for it. And I was like, this is going to happen, and that's exactly what happened. But it's a battle. It's a battle that I love, because I feel like when you talk about feminism and what your feminism is, everybody agrees. I think this generation of men agree. I think a lot of men are feminists, but nobody wants to say it, or they don't know what. I think everyone still thinks that feminists are a bunch of man-hating, angry lesbians. You're shaking your head, and it's true. Like, a lot of people get confused that I'm married and I'm a feminist. They're like, I'm married to Humyn. But anyhow, so I have this kind of like policy world, and I'm in it, and it was so great because U.S. foreign policy, and I was explaining it to some of the young women before the workshop started. People really don't understand how important and powerful U.S. foreign policy is, and how much about women's rights they will put into clauses and into legislation that affects women's lives in Bangladesh, that affects women's lives in South Africa. There's an anti-prostitution pledge, and the largest global AIDS health initiative in the U.S., which is PEPFAR, is a Preston Emergency Plan for AIDS relief. And if you spend even a week in Washington, you will get acronyms like that stuck in your head. That doesn't give any American health services to prostitutes who are HIV positive. That's a clause you have to sign. They don't give any family planning services to HIV pregnant women. You know, it's the antiviral drug that stops AIDS being transmitted to your child. So there's a lot of, the politics of women's health, when you hear women's rights advocates say that, never underestimate it. We always get kind of labeled as, oh, you know, the feminists are just causing an uproar for nothing. But what did we all see last year with the insurance reform that took place in America? What was holding it all up? Abortion, right? It's 2013, and there are old white men in Washington that are still writing policies that dictate the health and rights of women here and the health and rights of women and girls around the world. So I felt like we were in this great policy world, but I felt like this attitude that people had towards feminism and global women's rights was very condescending and very backward. Like, those poor brown women, we have to help those poor brown women that are selling their girls and marrying off your children at like 13 years old. And I'm going to talk about the India gang rape, obviously, as many of you heard about, and I just wrote about. So I'll be talking about that towards the end of my talk. But I was just so frustrated, and I didn't understand, because even though I came from Bangladesh, and yes, women are so oppressed, I also came from a family where the women were really strong. We're 4 sisters and my mom, and even our dog was a girl. So my dad was like super fun. And from my mom's side of the family, I saw these really strong aunts, and even if they weren't like super career women or CEOs, they were very, I mean, the women just ran everything. And I think in cultures where the women are used to or traditionally not in the public sphere, they're really running the show behind the scenes. And actually, now they're running the scene everywhere, even in the public sphere. So I just didn't understand, and I felt like I was actively being a part of feeding the stereotype, because we were lobbying for Afghan women, girls' rights, and we're doing all this stuff. But I just kept seeing that, in a country like America, where laws are so important and legislation is so important, that the Equal Rights Amendment here failed in 1973, and there've been some campaigns to bring it back up, but I just thought that in this country, legally still, I mean, women are inferior to men. The Equal Rights Amendment never passed. We're still fighting for equal pay. And then I thought about how in Bangladesh we have acid violence, or, in India you have female infanticide, and it just made me realize that all women around the world are fighting for their rights. It's just different how our cultures have oppressed us. A lot of people in America think that, you can wear miniskirts and you can work. We've already won the fight for women's rights. There's no point. Why do you work at the Feminist Majority Foundation? And what are the feminists bitching about now? But nobody realized that there's not a single country in the world where women have achieved true equality. So I was so frustrated. There were so many stereotypes. And I was so angry, and I felt like people understood what feminism was, but somehow the message was getting lost. So my girlfriends were like, actually I just thought that maybe they made me start my blog so I would stop talking to them, boring them. But they were like, we should start a blog. And I was like, well, I was saying this earlier, you know, nowadays everybody has a blog. 4 or 5 years ago, it was still kind of new. I was like, does the world really need another blog? Like, shoot me in the head, I'm just gonna start a blog. And I was at one more so depressing meeting on Capitol Hill, talking about women's health and rights, trying to convince these old, actually young white male staffers of the congressmen and senators who you have to get the legislation through, trying to educate them about women's health and rights. And I was so frustrated, I actually got up, I left this meeting, and I just went to wordpress.com, and I just started it. It didn't look like this. It was like anushayspoint.wordpress.com. It was like huge. It was like before I bought the URL, and I just started it. I just started writing about everything now that I work for and that I kind of believe in. It kind of made everything come full circle. But I started this blog, and like the only people that read it was like my mom and my husband. I really liked it. I was kind of like, where do I go? Like, I was so frustrated, and I got it all out, and now what? How do I find other people that share my experiences? And my husband actually made me email the editor every single blog or website that I read and made me like submit my stuff, and like no one ever got back. And then one day Huffington Post got back, and it kind of, you know, it's just one blog, but it really started everything for me because it's like the most linked, I don't know if this is still true, but it's like the most linked to blog in the world, and they cross posts from everywhere, so that really kind of opened things up for me. And I just started writing for everyone. I just started like submitting, and then it got cross-posted, and now I write for Ms., Huffington, Forbes, Tribune. I mean, I write for everybody. A lot of times people will take my work, and I didn't even know that I was, you know, on this. So I'll just get a Google over it, and I'm like, did they pay? So that's really why I do what I do and how I started with this blog. Somebody asked me to talk about women in journalism, and I mean, I feel like it's so different now. When I've been writing forever, I come from a family of journalists, and I've been writing since I was 16 and published since I was 16, and my parents were really good about, at the time, of course, I was like, my life is just going to end in Dhaka, and I'm going to be like, either going to feminist symposiums, or they made me like intern at this magazine where I had to go there every day after school, and then I'd get published once a week. Of course, now I'm like, that was so great because it started my earliest portfolio, but at the time I was just like, my parents are out to just destroy me. But I stopped writing I was like all into writing, and I was going to be this big journalist from like my whole, I guess, high school life, and then I got to college, and I just entered this, I guess it was the end of college. And when I was like 22 to 29 of this like insane writer's block that was so intense and long-lasting, I actually thought maybe I wasn't a writer after all, and it was just a phase. But what I think is really great about the technology that we have in the blogging world is that it's really reciprocal, and it's almost like you don't have to wait for someone to give you a platform anymore. You can create it yourself, and it doesn't necessarily always have to be, you know, a blog, but it's like the internet has kind of given you the space that I feel like my generation, I don't know if I say my generation, but maybe we didn't have 5 or 6 years ago. I mean, I can't tell you how long in my career I was waiting for somebody to give me this platform. And one of my girlfriends who was instrumental in me starting my blog, even now I turn around to her and she's godmother of my child. And I'm just like, I'm so glad you made me do that. Because you realize you just don't have to wait anymore for people to hand you something. You can take it. You can take the power, you can take the platform, and if you have something to say, in this day and age, you will get heard really fast. So please make sure you have something to say. Just don't be one of those people that's like out there talking just for the sake of talking. Just like, oh, so have something meaningful to say, and I hope I have something meaningful to say. But I feel like because you can create your own platform, it comes with a really huge responsibility. Your voice is so accessible. It's important to make sure that what you have to say is important. I'm going to read now two pieces. The thing about when you blog, because it's usually linked to a recent current event or news event, kind of dates your pieces. But I wanted to read one piece about kind of the politics of women's movement before I got to the India gang movement. And then I really wanted to hear from you guys. So, do you want to hear two articles or one? Do you want to hear the politics piece first or the Indian gang movement? Politics. Maybe I should just. Do a lot of you have sections about the recent gang rape in India? We all follow it. You guys know about it? I think maybe I'll just start with them and go with that and see what they find in the discussion. I do want to look this up. Okay. So this is my most recent piece that I wrote for Forbes, and it's called India's Tipping Point: Death of Rape Victims Sparks Global Outrage. The brutal gang rape and death of a 23-year-old female medical student in India has prompted outrage and horror around the world. The physiotherapy student was tortured and raped by a group of 6 men on December 16th, armed with a metal bar on a private bus in New Delhi. She died from her injuries in Singapore hospital on Sunday. Yesterday morning, as per Hindu custom, the ashes of her cremated body were scattered in the Ganges River. Police have detained 5 men and a teenager and are seeking the death penalty against the accused. The woman was raped for nearly an hour before a metal rod was pushed inside of her, critically damaging her internal organs. The incident has sparked marches across India, where a woman is estimated to be raped every 20 minutes, with Delhi being labeled the rape capital of the country. Huge protests and demonstrations voice people's anger against the treatment of women in India, demanding tougher laws on violence against women. The death of the young woman has become a rallying cry against the violence all Indian women face in society, despite making huge economic and social strides. The 23-year-old's death symbolizes a clash between the India with which has the highest number of women in government, and the India with the world's largest coerced prostitution rates. The dichotomy is fascinating because it exposes a country in which women simultaneously have so much and so little power. India is a country where women are worshipped as goddesses, celebrated as prime ministers, yet also raped to death on public transportation. Why is violence against women so pervasive in the world's largest democracy? In The Hindu, author Ratna Kapoor tries to offer Indian men's, quote, sense of displacement as an explanation for the violence, and I quote, "What is the anger that motivates this level of violence? Is the sight of a young, smartly dressed, educated female professional generating a sense of displacement in men?" Over the past several decades, women's rights have proliferated and they're claiming their subjectivity, asserting their identity as women as opposed to being someone's wife, daughter, or sister. And with the opening up of the market, women are more visible in the workplace. That they are entering male spheres of power has challenged the sense of superiority and entitlement of the traditional Indian male. The idea of a woman as a fully formed human subject remains a difficult concept to embrace, end quote. As a Bangladeshi, I can understand the sense of displacement men may feel, especially when they're not used to seeing women in the public sphere. But I am also fed up with us excusing men. You feel threatened by women accessing education, asserting their rights as human beings, so you rape them with a metal rod. You rape them until their intestines come out. You throw her body from the bus and leave her for dead. Violence against women and girls in India and around the world must stop. There is no point of stacking our government with women, letting them run our country and worshiping them as religious deities if they are not safe on our streets, if they are killed at birth for being born girls. When I think of the pure torture this young woman went through in the last hours of her life, when I force myself to look at her picture before and after her attack, all I can think of is that she looks like me. She looks like my sister. She looks like my daughter. She could be in my family. As a South Asian woman, I hang my head in horror because although I know this rape happened in India, I can only imagine how many similar incidents are going unreported right next door in Bangladesh. We as an international community need to say no to the violence, just as Indian society is clearly doing. And we also need to stop with the excuses. It is 2013, and women in India and around the world are only going to get more educated and more powerful. people need to get used to it. Men need to get used to it. It's just a fact of life that from India to Indiana, women are only going to become more prosperous. It is a natural progression for a sex that has been denied their health and rights for centuries. Women around the world will continue their climb upwards, and men need to stop using violence